So, Jeremy Chambers, Independence Acres Homestead. Boys and I are out here doing day 2 of garden cleanup. Today we're going to be tackling the Cherokee tan pumpkin patch. It's harvest day. Well, it's near the end of October, and it is time to get all of the Cherokee tan pumpkins harvested. Now, there's a couple different things that we're dealing with here. Number one is some of the Cherokee tan pumpkins that have a lot of pock marks on them. So as you can see here, it's not pretty, but these pumpkins are still good. So these are the ones from our hailstorm back in August. If you're curious about what happened, check out this video here. So we've got these ones to harvest. This is what we call our first generation pumpkin, Cherokee tan pumpkin that we're gonna be pulling out of this patch. And then we have our second generation Cherokee tan pumpkin. And these ones, guess what? They're not so tan. So these are ones that grew after the hailstorm in August. And these ones are still green. Here's the great thing about these pumpkins though, is that we have actually been able to get these to ripen on the table in the dining room. So we'll set these out on the table, and hopefully in about a month, these things will be ripe. So the plan is just to get these all up, wiped down, and then into the house. So as you can see, the vines are all pretty much dead from the frost that we've had over the last couple weeks. So I'm just gonna be going through with some pruning shears, cutting the pumpkins off the green vines because most of the vines themselves are still green. The leaves are just dead. And then the boys are gonna come behind me with some rags, wipe them off, and get them into the good old garden wagon over here. This thing has been great this year for getting mulch into the garden, getting the harvest up, feed bags out of the car. If you don't have one of these heavy duty harvest or garden wagons, you really should. Man, they make all the difference in the world when it comes to getting stuff out. So I'm just gonna walk through here and we'll just start cutting these vines back. And as I cut, the boys are gonna come through and harvest. Make sure you wipe them down, guys, okay? We don't want to take any of the dirt. Now, one of the things about the pumpkins this year that kind of freaked me out a little bit was they had a little variation in shape. Now, if you follow us from last year, we grew these long distance away from our other squash in the garden. They were actually over on the other side of the house, a good 120 feet away. But an interesting thing happened. We got this variation in the Cherokee tan pumpkins. And I know that these are Cherokee tan. I pulled these out of the Cherokee tan pumpkin, pumpkins that we grew, and for some reason they've got a long neck. And we're not sure why, but they've got the coloration of the Cherokee tan, and we got 2 inside the house that we're gonna be cutting up and eating tonight to see whether or not they are actually a Cherokee tan pumpkin in flesh and flavor. So it's a really interesting thing. At first I was like, oh man, they cross-pollinated with you know, butternut. Looks just like a butternut. But I thought to myself, it's impossible. We didn't have butternuts last year. So it could be that they crossed, some of them got cross-pollinated with yeah, the Tromboncino, and that's why they've got a little bit of a long neck. All right, let's get these cut so the boys can get harvesting. All right, so here's a casualty of some of the freezing weather that we've had. This thing actually split open, so they're just gonna cut this up and it'll go to the chickens. All right, so this is the squash arch that we grew the pumpkins on this year, and it worked out well, except it actually collapsed by about 6 inches because of the weight of some of these pumpkins. Now, the ones that were on the trellis here actually grew a little better than the ones on the ground because they were a little older. They had matured, the vines themselves had matured a little faster. But we got all of the fruit. We got all the fruit cut off, and now it's going to be a matter of just cutting these back and getting the trellis cleaned off, and yeah, getting the ground cleaned up. That's probably going to be a bigger chore than harvesting the pumpkins themselves. We still have a few more to grab off the ground over here, but the boys wanted to show off some of these larger ones. So this is one of the questionable varieties. We're not sure that this is 100% pure, but man, that's probably a good 10, 15 pound squash. Take it, take it, take it. And it's because of this size that I really think they may have crossed a little bit with the Tramontino from last year, even though we had about 120 feet of separation. So, you know, the distance doesn't always guarantee that you're not going to get the cross-pollination. We were hoping it would, but it looks as if we may have had a little bit of cross-pollination occur. But looks like we got a number of good squash here, a number of good fruit that we'll be able to eat all winter long. And yeah, some of these have some definite ripening to go. But all in all, we'll probably have anywhere from 100 to 100 and, well, I'm gonna weigh it, but I'm guessing we'll probably have about 140 pounds of squash here that should be pretty good and last us through most of the winter. Pumpkins are all harvested out of the patch. Well, pumpkins, squash, whatever you want to call them. The fruit is all harvested out of the patch here. Now it's time to get it cleaned up. The pumpkin vines that were on the ground cleaned up fairly easily and quickly. That's going to be the chore over there, because these things have just woven their way in through all of the cattle panel trellis. So Luke's over here using the clippers to get them cut out, and Josh and I are going to start ripping them out. Use those legs. Use those legs.
Water cooler.
Here, I got you. Pull. Pull. Keep going. There we go. Watch out, Josh. Coming down. All right. That's how you do it. And there we go. Our trellis is, well, for the most part clean. We'll come back and take off a couple of these last few pieces of dried up vine and leaves. All right, guys, come on over. Celebratory high five. Good job.
Sorry.
Only took us about 20 minutes.
Hands dirty.
Only took us about 20 minutes and just a few scratched hands getting this done.